I love starting. And to me, the catalyst piece of this is starting, right? Because so often, like I said, we fail to start anything new. And I'm always the one that gravitates to, like, I want to go try things and I want to test things and I want to continue to push things forward. To me, it's the ability of wanting, not just wanting, but almost like you have to start something, right? Like you see it and you have to go do it. You have to go try it. And to me, that's what a catalyst is.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering Catalyst to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations. Today, we are delighted to welcome Tim Sackett, who is the CEO of HRU a leading technical recruiting firm. He has over 20 years of combined executive HR and talent acquisition experience working with Fortune 500 companies. He is sought after as an international speaker on leadership, HR and talent acquisition tech, talent acquisition itself, and HR execution. In fact, in 2023, he was named a top global HR and recruitment influencer by HR Executive. Woo! Right? Pretty awesome.
Big
he
thing.
is. What's that, Tim?
Big thing.
Big thing. It is. It is. We love to celebrate. He is also senior faculty member with the Josh Bersin Academy and angel investor and advisor, and sits on multiple HR technology corporate boards. He's the author of the newly released book, The Talent Fix Volume 2, and he writes daily on his blog, Tim Sackett Project. He is married to a Hall of Fame wife and has 3 Gen Z sons that he has more followers on Twitter X than they do. Well done. It's so great to have you with us, Tim.
Thanks for having me. You forgot that the most important one is what my wife calls me. She calls me a micro celebrity. She's like, there's 13 HR ladies in the world that want your picture. And I'm like, I'm so thankful for the 13. By the way, the greatest thing you guys want, so the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, having a spouse, because you get in this world of social and you think you're bigger than what you are. And then you're like, she's always just teasing me going, you're not really that famous. And that's what, like, when I did a podcast, it was HR famous because it was kind of tongue in cheek. And we're go down vacation or going down to the Detroit airport. And if you've been in that McNamara terminal, it's like a mile.
Yeah.
And there's all the moving walkways and it's in the middle, it's like 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. There's nobody in the airport. One guy coming down the walk, like coming down the moving walkway this way. We're coming down this way. And he goes, Tim Sackett, are you Tim Sackett? Like, I read your blog. And she just looks at me and goes, I can't believe that just happened. Like, your head is not going to fit in the airplane. And I looked up to the sky. Thank you, God, for making that happen. Because I mean, like, the only time in my life I've been recognized in the wild and she had to be with me. I was like, this is perfect.
It's perfect, right? Because if you told her about it, she would have been like, sure, honey.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So who wanted your picture? Okay.
Were you holding your book while they asked?
No. I mean, I was like, again,
you.
shocked. Like, I was telling you guys, like, hit record about being in line at Sherm Talent with my book being launched and everyone having a copy and me standing in line with them and having no idea who I am.
Yeah, it is. The mini celebrity. I love it. That's a perfect descriptor. All right.
Exactly.
So typically we begin by asking folks how they relate to the concept of catalyst. And I'd love to ask you a slightly different question, because in your LinkedIn bio, you have this line that I just love. It's a shout out to Hamilton, definitely a historical catalyst. It says, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. So I'd love you to talk to us about what that line is about, and we'll kind of tie that into your sense of the concept of catalyst.
I'm very much a person that says yes. In fact, it's probably not like my biggest weakness is that I say yes to everything, not knowing potentially like potentially what that might turn into. And it's insofar like in my life, it's turned into a lot of really great stuff. I've also, had the opportunity to own and actually run the business my mother started 45 years ago. And again, her asking me to come and, run the company when I was having a successful like corporate talent acquisition career. Again, you're taking these chances to kind of go and do other really cool stuff that you think could have a major impact on your life. And so for me, that's what that line meant to me, was that you have, this ability to go out there and and take your shot and do things, but it's only if you're willing to say yes. Because we can all sit back and be really comfortable just doing the thing we're doing. In fact, most of the failure I see in my life from people is because they knew they were failing, but they were comfortable in what that failure was because the chance of them succeeding potentially was also a bigger failure for them. And so they're like, well, I'll stay with this failure because if I do that, oh my gosh, it could be a colossal failure. But you're like, but you're failing. Like that also could be a colossal success. And we see this happen in our life so often where we see, executives that get, let go or fired. And you're like, but you knew you were failing. Why didn't you try to change or do anything?
That is so powerful, the say yes. So would you say that most of your career has been driven by saying yes? And is it external opportunity or is it things that bubble inside that you're saying yes to?
I think both.
Yeah.
And I think I surround myself, or at least my team feels comfortable, around as that as well as like I'm pushing them to say yes to a lot of things. Like go try things. I tell people when I hire them, like, look, I don't know if you'll like recruiting. I don't know if we'll like you. I don't know if you'll be good at this. Like I said, but and then there's like that Liam Neeson Taken line, like I'm going to teach you a certain set of skills and you can take those skills anywhere. And I want you to take them everywhere. I hope that I give you the best environment and pay you the best and all that good stuff. You'll never want to leave. But at the end of the day, I'm going to help teach you something that you don't have right now. And you're going to have the ability to go say yes to a lot of things, and that I think is pretty powerful. And so people that like are willing to come in with no background or no knowledge and do that, I tend to have really like long tenure. I don't really lose people. That's kind of how we started.
It sounds like you deeply see people and kind of what they're good at as opposed to looking at the skill sheet.
I always call my team too, and some people take offense to this. It was the Rudolph, like the aisle of misfit toys. I always see my team as the aisle of misfit toys. We're super inclusive. We have introverts, extroverts, women, men, black, white, brown, like everything here. And if you were like most companies, I would run it, like, especially in the recruiting world, it's like all of a sudden it's just a cookie cutter. It's like, hey, look at all these beautiful people and they're all 6'2" and wear the exact same shirt and tie. And you come into my world and you're like, what happened here? It's like, there's like a random mishmash of everybody. But the thing we all have in common is like, one of our guiding kind of principles and visions is we want to see everybody be like wildly successful, because one of us can't be successful without the other, right? We have to make sure that we support each other like that. And if you're not here to support other people and help them see their success along with your own, like you're not going to make it in our culture,
I love that. I'm guessing that this impacts your philosophies as a talent acquisition person, and I'll come back to that. But
Sure.
So I'd love to round it out. What does the concept of catalyst mean to you? Is it something that resonates personally?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I love starting, and to me, the catalyst piece of this is starting, right? Because so often, like I said, we fail to start anything new, and I'm always the one that gravitates to, like, I want to go try things, and I want to test things, and I want to continue to push things forward. I've never. It was funny. I was at Columbia Sportswear a couple weeks ago, and in their main lobby, they have this thing that goes. This is the original mother that started this, Mama Bert or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact thing, but there was a quote on the wall that said, "It's perfect. Now make it better." And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me. Like, like I grew up with a father that was like, hey, it's not broke, don't, fix it kind of thing. And then a mom that was the exact opposite. I'm way more like my mother. And so like to me, it's the ability of wanting, not just wanting, but almost like you have to start something, right? Like you see it and you have to go do it. You have to go try it. And to me, that's what a catalyst is.
Literally our definition. People who are taking in information at speed that's a little faster probably than those around to see the opportunities and cannot stop themselves from the moving into action part.
Yeah.
Right. Like
and sometimes when it's not needed, right? I mean, the perfection, go make it better, but we could still make it better. Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or it's perfect right now, but maybe a week from now or a month or a year from now, it's not going to be perfect. And so like, what's the next perfect? We should be striving for that,
Yeah.
I drive my wife crazy with this, by the way.
Oh,
because she's like, you're never going to retire. You're going to work till the day you die because and I'm like, I have so much fun. Like, I don't consider myself, people ask me all the time, like, oh, like, what are you thinking about? Like from retirement, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I can do anything I want right now. I love what I do. And why would I like retire? Like that sounds insane. What am I going to go like, work out and play golf every day for the rest of my life? Like, no, that's, I can do, do all that and do what I want to do.
From our very first retreat, Tim, we had a group of folks that said, can you run a retreat for our partners and spouses to help us understand those? So exactly as you're saying. And that next stage, it's fun. We have a group of executives, our Catalyst Leadership Trust, and we just did a set of research with them talking about what we call the third, because we started seeing a pattern with the executives that we work with that catalysts don't retire, or, retire is like a dirty word.
Yeah.
And so there's like, we talk about the first third, like figuring out what you want to do and gaining some mastery, kind of getting to the top of whatever that means for you. And then it's, what do you really love to do?
Yeah.
And how do you spend time focused on that and kind of stop that achievement race? So I see you.
Do you guys find in your research and like when you work with Catalyst as well, like to me, I've naturally surrounded myself with executors because I love to start, but then it's the execution side of it that really is impactful. And so I'm drawn to people that are masterful at executing, maybe not want to start, maybe not have that fire to start, but when you give it to them and you show them the way, like they're just going to go knock stuff down, right, and make it happen. And so I'm constantly like looking at those kinds of people. In fact, my best friend in the world and my wife, I would think are masterful executors, and they're almost exactly the same persona. Like my best friend is my wife and vice versa. Like, and not the same person. They're two different people. One's a male, one's a female.
What if your wife is your best friend too?
Exactly. But they always like, I mean, my wife laughs constantly because like, she'll like, oh my gosh, like that's exactly what I would say or do. Right. So you just surround yourself with these executors.
Yes, we see that in the research all the time. Shan, go ahead.
Yeah, my joke is, and this is true whether I'm an executive or not. It's like, I need an EA, I need a chief of staff, and I need a VP of ops.
Yeah.
Like to just keep up with all of the execution stuff. Totally.
Yep.
So totally aligned with what we've
Yeah.
seen. And one of the key recommendations that we make with executives, if you don't have that, it's going to be a struggle to really have the impact that you want, for sure.
Yep, for sure.
Would love to turn and tap into your talent acquisition side, right? And we in the world, one of the things we do is we help organizations identify these change makers and really aligned with, you look at the Gartner research of what are the skills of the future. What do you see in talent acquisition and recruiting in terms of profiles? And is there a profile that aligns to Catalyst that you see happening in the recruiting world today?
It's interesting because, it seems like for the last few years, everything's been pushing like to the skills thing. And you kind of understand what it is. It's like, oh, skills. And it started with the DE9 movement where you're like going, wait, if people don't have the same opportunity for education or for experiences, that's not fair. So we should literally look at skills, but we kind of went right ditch, left ditch, right? We all of a sudden said, well, now education experience doesn't matter. And you're like, well, it actually does, right? And fit matters, even though you go, well, wait a minute, if you do fit, then you're all going to, you're just looking for more of the same. But at the end of the day, like all this stuff actually really matters. It's all of it. I want to say like, hey, given all things being equal from a skill standpoint, of course, then your education and your network and your experience. My example I give every time is like, hey, I'm General Motors. We're trying to make this giant move from combustion engine to electrical vehicle. I can go hire an electrical engineer from Maytag, or I can hire one from Tesla. They both tested out and assessed the exact same skill level. Then like, well, then they like, oh, well, then you should, now what? Like, well, no, the one that worked at Tesla for 5 years is way more valuable to me in their journey of what they've done, even though the skill set might be exactly the same and they can actually produce the same from a skill standpoint. That experience is super important. So it's and, right? It's not one or the other, but yet we've taken this kind of right ditch, left ditch mentality in HR. So I do think that for me, the people that are great at recruiting are ones that immediately can assess, right? Is this person a cultural fit? Is this person going to come in and actually fit within that? And it's not always super popular right now to talk about that. But what we find is that if you don't have a cultural fit, it doesn't matter what your experience and skill set is. You're probably going to opt out to begin with. And again, I think the culture fit thing, it just got a bad rap because it was like, well, they put culture fit in as you're just going to hire more white guys. And you're like, well, no, culture fit means you actually want to do the same stuff that we want to do. And you want to live in the same kind of world that we live in. And, I can't go and say, hey, I want to go hire a bunch of remote workers, because I'm trying to be inclusive. And yet everything we do is face-to-face collaborative and they're going to fail remotely. Right. So, so I think it's important that we really take a look at all three of those components. Hey, do you really want to work here with us? Does your crazy match our crazy? And then do you have the skills we need? And then what about the experiences and education? Does that matter to us? Taking a look at the full person. I think we just started to say, well, a person's just a bag of skills. You're like, no, I'm way more than a bag of skills. And then think of the three of us right now talking. Like some company might go and go, oh, here's your skills assessment. And they have 2 dozen, 3 dozen, maybe they have 100. We have thousands of skills, right? We're not just like this kind of like small number of skills that we're being assessed by.
Go ahead.
You go ahead, Jen.
I'm curious because like sort of bouncing off of that to the skills, because I agree. And I think that the culture and the fit piece is so important. One of the things that we have a vision, Tim, and I think I shared this in our first conversation, is we imagine that there will be a top 100 Catalyst friendly places to work.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason for that is because while the skills and the fit are important, there is a new set of skills that, at least from our perspective, organizations need to have in a way that they've never had before, which is really the Catalyst embodied, right? It's like, how do you navigate and lead through uncertainty and bring agility into that? And so I'm wondering, like, have you worked, how do organizations, are they thinking about that, I guess, full stop? And then how are they doing that if they are doing that?
Yeah, it's this, I wish we could change the terminology, but it's so ingrained in us now, right? It's the soft skills versus hard skills kind of thing going, oh, the soft skills stuff is so much more important. It's not really soft by definition, right? Like these are almost like, it's like, hey, these are your kind of technical skills and these are like mandated, like, personal skills that you need to actually work in our environment. But we tend to like label them as soft skills. And I think all the research shows like that these soft skills potentially are more important than the hard skills, because most of the hard skills we can actually teach. Now, do I want a brain surgeon that just is a great person, that's really motivated, but has no skill of cutting into my head? Well, no, like, but that's a one-off job, right? Most of the jobs, I used to have it myself. When I would hire recruiters, we mandated that they had a 4-year degree. And I did that for some reason, right? One was, it's not actually easy to get a degree. And it's not, even the class load type stuff might be one piece of that, but all of the dotting the I's and crossing the T's and paying the end amount. And like, it's just, there's so much like bureaucracy to get like an actual degree, right? It's kind of funny. Like so often I'll talk to somebody and they'll go, well, I did all the class work, but I just haven't gotten a degree. And you're like, okay, you're an idiot. Like, I don't even know what to tell. Like I went 99% of the way on the marathon. I just didn't crawl across the line. Like, you're like, what? Like, I don't, like, there makes no sense to me. Like, you could not work in my environment if you were that person, right?
Yeah.
Now, what I missed was, like, in fact, one of my top recruiters right now went to the military and was a tanker. And then we hired him and he came in and he's just an amazing person. Didn't have a degree, but he had leadership and he had this like ability to like, he just had this work ethic. Like everything about him was like what we would say would be a great recruiter if we could teach him the recruiting skills, and that he wanted to do it. And so I think we missed out on a lot of people like that. I did like a couple of single moms that were just kind of busting their asses to make it through life, that, like on these hourly jobs that we were able to come and teach them how to recruit. And then they just, turned into these giant successes in life. And being raised by a single mom, for me, that like really hit home to say, like, why are we mandating something that had little sense, right? Which gets back to that kind of skills conversation. But it wasn't, I don't actually need them to have hard skills. It was all these soft skills that we talked about in terms of being able to come in. And part of that was, when you start something, can you finish it? Because recruiting is a bunch of starting. It's like, hey, I have an opening. I got to go find somebody. I have to go find somebody. And then all of a sudden it gets hard. The hiring manager starts pushing back and going, oh no, I need to see more people. No, I don't like these people. No, this one has, this one's too short, too hot, too cold, too whatever. Like we start doing that kind of, three pigs thing, that hiring managers do. And so it's this ability to really go out and determine. And I think a lot of companies are looking at that now. The hard part is like the science behind that. Like when we take like starting to assess that is kind of akin to witchcraft at this point in our lives, right? Like it's, there's not a lot. I think we've gotten better, But when you go back and take a look at what most of the soft skills assessment stuff was built on, is it was built on framework from 30 years ago that hasn't really been updated a whole lot. And I think that's where you get a lot of hiring managers and even executives that just go, I don't know if I trust this or not. Like they know what they know when they see it, right? Like, you know, when we interview people, we're like, we're looking for those things to say like, hey, are you motivated? Like one of the questions I love to ask about somebody is talk to me about passion that you have in life, right?
Mm.
And it's not about, I don't need them to be passionate about work. And like one of the girls we hired that's amazing, she was into ballroom dancing and she just talked about how she went to practice and learned and then went to these competitions and and I'm like, if you can throw your life into something at that level and be passionate about it, again, I don't know if you'll do that with recruiting, but at least I know you have the ability to become passionate about something. Because I'll tell
Yeah.
you, I interview a lot of people and they'll be like, okay, like they're like, oh my gosh, recruiting's my life. I'm so passionate about recruiting. And I'm like, cool, tell me what you do. And like, well, I come to work every day and I recruit. You know, you're like, well, no, that's what you get paid to do. Like, you know, like you don't have to be me. You don't have to like go on podcasts and write books and write a blog every single day about it and like constantly live it. But like, I would like, who do you read? Who do you follow? How do you educate yourself, develop yourself? And so often in my life, I find that the people that are non-catalysts, they can't be passionate about anything, or they haven't been passionate about anything.
It's so fascinating. There's a program, Catalyst program that we just ran, and we actually do have the IP to be able to identify catalysts. And
Yeah,
there's this one woman, and we sort of like we won't do it. The only way we'll run a Catalyst program is if it's opt-in, but because that's the whole point,
for
right?
sure.
But there was this one woman, and everyone was like totally shocked. And then when they stopped and thought about it, they're like, well, she does run a nonprofit after work, and she has written 2 books. And I mean, like, you listen to the list after, and you're just like, yeah. And so, like, I want to bring it back because it's not to like, disparage anyone either. I don't know that most organizations like have the intentionality that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And even if they do know how to do it. So I'm wondering, do you have any examples of companies that have been really good at recognizing the need that they need more change agents because they're going through constant reinvention now, and then have been able to execute on identifying them? And I just want to put the caveat, because people are often like, well, you're advocating for all catalyst companies. No, we're not. That would be a disaster.
Yeah.
You'd never have any executors. But do you know any companies that have done that piece well?
I don't know as companies. What I know is leaders that do it. Like with,
Mm.
especially what I see is like the best leaders I know in my life, when they go into a new role, that's one of the first things they do is like, hey, I need, like, for lack of a better term, like I need a number 2 or number 3. Like what they're saying is I need to find catalysts that are around me that are going to be, that are going to be willing to go through this fight,
That's
because you
right.
know how because the political savviness and organizational issues that you face to be able to get people to change. And it's not that the organization necessarily it says they don't want to change. The bigger the organization, the bigger the enterprise, it politically, it just like people are just fighting to maintain what they have, or they're like, hey, look, I'm trying to do this change over here, but the change you're trying to do is going to impact my change, so I'm going to fight you now. And you end up with like these people that are just like, it feels like the entire organization's working against you, even though you were hired to come in and change. Like,
Yes.
and you're like,
Yes.
why is this happening? I think the crazier part for me is like, so I see this on the TA side all the time. I go into enterprise organizations. Obviously, their recruiting sucks. It's bad. Their entire executive team hates it. Like, I mean, it's like they're just beaten down. And then they'll go like, oh, well, IT won't let us do this, and marketing won't let us do this, and finance won't let us do this. And one of the things I do is like, that's part of my contract is like, look, if we can't get the CEO, the CO, the CFO, the CTO all in a room at the same time I mean, all I need is 30 minutes. If we can't get them in the room, then you're wasting your money on me. Nope. Okay, we get this done. We'll get it scheduled. And every single time within 5 minutes, I have the CEO like nodding their head going, yeah, why aren't we doing this? Like, and they look at, they're looking right at the CIO, and they're looking right at the CFO. They're looking right at the marketing CMO, and they're all going, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we should be doing this. And you're like, and then you're looking at the CHRO and the chief people officer, and they're just like, these people refuse to do this stuff before you sat there and the CEO. So there's so much of this organizationally is like senior led from top down. Unfortunately, it's the way it is. But then once they get to go, then all of a sudden, like they can just move mountains. But there's so much of it is like, and sometimes I think it's just not having the conversation. Because again, when I was in those roles on the corporate side, The what I loved about being in HR is I could call any executive or any person in the company and say, "Hey, I need to meet with you." They would never ask the question why. They would just be like, "Oh crap."
I
And
never
like,
thought
you know,
about
like
that power. That's
they would just,
amazing.
oh, they would be like, "For sure." When? I'm like, "Right now? Can we do like," you know, like, "Oh my God," something, you know, and they were so worried, like somehow someone said something like, you know, but I could get into any office. And then once you were there, all of a sudden you could have the conversation and realize like, hey, they had needs and wants and change that they're trying to put through as well, that they could use your help and vice versa. And all of a sudden, you know, good things can happen.
It's a key takeaway that I just want to double down on for our listeners. Executives, if you are listening, a half an hour of time as a conversation can move mountains in organizations. It's so true. It's so spot on. And without it, you're probably going to fail.
I do this really cool thing with full teams, right? So like kind of all hands meetings. And I set it up as like an exercise. So I tell people, hey, everyone has to have like a pen and paper. You're going to write down something. I'm going to tell you to write down. But we set it up as the CEO who's in the room with us, right, is going to call you in individually. And they're going to present you like, we have this project that's going to change the history of our company, right? It's going to change the trajectory of our company. You're the person that's going to be leading it, super confidential, right? And I can't tell you what it is, but what I can tell you is I'm going to allow you to choose one other person in the company to do this with. And immediately they write down a name. I tell you, write down the name. And then I asked somebody, like, raise your hand, we share who you wrote with. And I was like, oh yeah, for sure, Tim. Like, you know, I chose Shannon. Well, tell me why you chose Shannon. And like they say these wonderful things about Shannon. She's an executor. She knows she's an informal leader in the company. She knows how to get things done. Blah 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 blah. She's a catalyst, right? And Shannon's now crying because like people, like, who else put Shannon's name down? And like 5 or 6 people are putting their names up. And then you go to the next person. And so often when I leave those like meetings, the CEO says, I just created like a committee of those people that were named that I'm going to meet with now once a month. And we're just going to have lunch and talk because it's so powerful to understand like those are the people getting stuff done in your company.
I could nerd out about ONA all day long. Yes. All right, Tracy.
I love hearing so much that in your TA process, you're bringing folks together to hear the alignment. I have the question. It's not infrequent that we hear from Catalyst executives. I was so excited. The company scoped out this change. I got there and they weren't really ready for it.
Oh yeah, constantly.
And so, you know, you said you can't so much speak to necessarily organization, but leaders. How do you find that leaders are getting clear on the type of change that they're ready to help drive or that their organization might be ready for? And how is that translating into the TA process, if at all?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys see it. For me, it's always around pain, right? I think it's hard for us to, if we're not in pain, to want to change.
Mm.
And so often you see like semi-successful companies that are going down the wrong path, but they refuse to change, even though they know they're going down the wrong path because there's just not enough pain. And I don't know how you artificially create that pain. You know, sometimes the better leaders will understand like they're just going to do it, right, and start ripping some band-aids off and force change and sometimes force people out. And we see this with like some of the recent layoff stuff is I think organizational leaders have said like, no, we're going down the wrong direction, right? And we have to change something. And so we're going to kind of create this pain. It's hard to be, and it's so rare that you see someone that's super successful, but then also focused on continuing to go down this path where we got to, you know, really, you know, kind of change. So I don't know. I don't have any magic answer to that. Besides when I go in from the TA perspective, I tell people, if you really want to change, find the hiring manager or find the executive in your company that has the most pain and spend a lot of time with them because they're the ones that are going to be willing to try and change first. And if you're successful, everybody else is going to come to them or come to you and go, why can't I do that as well? Don't try to, the biggest failures we have in TA and HR, and I could argue every function in a company, is that we try to make major change all at once. And so we're like, hey, come Monday, we're gonna bolt on this giant program we created over the last 2 years and we're gonna turn it on. And then only 20% of the people get involved, 80% don't. It's this giant colossal failure and someone gets fired. And I'm like, no. Start tiny. Start with someone, right, that really wants it, that needs the help. And then if it's successful, great. If it's not, it's just a test and you're going to adjust and you're going to try something else, right? And no one's going to get fired over that because you were just trying something, you know, to test. If it's super successful, then you don't let everybody else on. You let the next person who has the most pain in, right? And you make it so that at the end of the day, I want like managers or executives coming to my office and yelling at me that why isn't their team the one that gets to do it next?
100%.
And then we'll have that conversation, right? But so often we just go, nope, it's going to come January 1st. We're all switching over to XYZ. And you're just like, why are you doing that? Like we have this history of organizational failure every time we try that, something like that.
McKinsey's failure rates haven't changed for transformational. It's been 70% for decades, and companies keep doing the same thing. And so when we work with companies, we do an activation sprint after the class. And the first thing we do is like, you have to clarify the appetite for change and find the person on the change curve who's like ready to come along with you.
Yeah.
And then you start to create this tipping point where instead of the 20% leaving the 80%, the 20% is now activating the other 80%. But everyone likes to be part of the wins, right? So when you see the wins, and to your point, everyone's like, well, how do I get some of that over here, right?
Totally. By the way, you don't have to have executive approval for a lot of this stuff. Like literally, it's like, hey, it's two managers just trying something. And if it works, then like, hey, I'm going to tell my VP about it. And then they'll tell somebody else. And like somebody else will take the win for it, but it doesn't really matter who takes the win, right? It just matters that we're doing the right thing.
Totally. All right. Last fun question, hopefully.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear about your favorite famous catalyst, past or present. Like who inspires you or who stands out to you?
When I think about that, like I have two, one dead, one alive. So I'll go to the dead one first. Like when I was, I found this guy when I was in college, Louis Biscaglia, who is like an author, like he's called like the Doctor of Love, right? And I just like, for whatever reason, I think being a male and like being raised by all women, like the voice just spoke to me. And the one quote that sticks with me all the time is he wrote that you don't love to be loved in return. You just love to love. And like, I live my life that way. Right. So I'm going to go and love people hard in my life, but I don't need them to love me in return. I do that for my own self. I love because that's who I am inside. So for me, that was a catalyst around that. In my real life, I would say my best friend, Chris Dunn, who is the head of global TA for Marriott, he is by far like the biggest catalyst I know. Like he came into like major organizations, had to make major change. And we get to talk about it and I get to see the success of what happens. And, and the reality is you feel sometimes like you're the most hated person in the organization. You feel like, like people are against you, but at the same time, like it's the only way that you're really going to change, especially in really kind of big enterprise organizations, is you have to go in and be a catalyst and be willing to do some unpopular things, knowing that it's the right thing. And again, you don't have to be unpopular to be unpopular. You don't have to be an ass. You still want to like work through and try to do the best for everybody and listen, but at the same time, like you have to be a little pushy, and you can't like let up, and you have to keep pushing. And when I come in and do this, do my like recruiting stuff with enterprise stuff, I always tell like the leader of that, probably half your team is going to be different in like 90 days to 6 months. Because you have a lot of people that are here getting paid a lot of money, not really doing what you need them to do, but they're super comfortable. And now you're going to make them uncomfortable, and they might not leave the company. They might just go find another position in the company, but they're going to leave you because you're making them uncomfortable. So those are the two.
Those are beautiful.
Thank you.
Truly beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And I just
by
have
the way,
to say,
I wrote the foreword to Chris's book. So he did Best Boss Ever, and then 9 Faces of HR. In Best Bosses Ever, I spent 2 full pages talking about how he's my best friend and like how much I love him and all this stuff. And I kept going back to the point of like going, and now you're uncomfortable. And I'm just going to keep writing like how 2 guys can actually have this deep male, like adult friendship.
that's amazing. So, so beautiful. Well, now we know what books to check out. Thank you so much. And Tim, thanks for an awesome conversation. This was super fun and enlightening.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to accelerate positive change, go to our website at catalystconstellations.com.
And be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out. And if you have other catalysts in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way.